Welcome everyone to another Reltio community show. My name is Chris Detzel. I'm the Director of Customer Community and Engagement. I feel like I've just done one of these just 2 days ago, actually. We have two special guests on the show today that have never been on the show. And I'm not going to say the last names of because they said I didn't have to, but we have Balaji. Balaji's from Takeda. He's a data quality manager, and he's our star for today. And we also have Abhi. He's a senior customer success manager at Reltio. And know the U on customer success shouldn't be capitalized. Apologize about that. But this show today will be a Q&A show. There will be no presentation, but we have some really great questions for Balaji, or Abhi does, and he's going to answer a lot of those questions. Now, with that said, today we will be taking questions at the end. We want to get this going, for the first 45 minutes or so, and then all those questions will be that the audience asks will be asked at the end. As usual, this is being recorded and will be posted to the Reltio community probably tomorrow or Monday, or Monday. So upcoming, we have several shows coming up. Really excited about these shows. So today is the Data Quality Management Commercial Pharma MDM Landscape with Takeda, with Balaji. On the 17th, which is next week, applying the Forrester TEI calculator to your enterprise. And then on December 1st, which I know a lot of folks are interested in as well, how data stewards, analysts, and business users can get the most of Reltio, the new Reltio UI. And then on the 8th, we are doing an emerging trends in data management, which is a high level kind of what's going on in the data management landscape for next year. And then we do have a technical show coming up, which I get excited about these technical shows just because I know people love to go deep into Reltio, but building complex survivorship strategies in data modeler. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to let Abhi kind of kick it off, but thank you both. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Chris. I guess I'm okay to take over now. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, Balaji and me. My name is Abhi Visuvasam. I'm a senior customer success manager here at Reltio. I've been here for about getting close to 3 years now, and I'm based out of Tampa, Florida. And I have on the call here with me Balaji Ranganathan, who's from Takeda. He's a data quality manager over there. I'm going to let him introduce himself in a minute over here, and then we'll get started on this. Go ahead, Balaji, introduce yourself, and then I'll take over from there.
Thank you, Chris and Abhi. It is such an honor to be here to talk about something that excites me on a daily basis. Good morning, all. My name is Balaji Ranganathan. I'm part of Takeda for almost 3 years. My role at Takeda is data quality manager, and I supervise and I oversee the master data management, which is built on Reltio platform. And I'm responsible and accountable for the feeds that come inside of Reltio and the data quality layer that it goes in, and then all the kick-out processing, and also the outbounds and the publishing, the golden record publishing, so on and so forth, which I take care of with my stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you, Balaji. So really quickly, an introduction to how this conversation even came out to be. Balaji and I'm obviously he's my customer. I work with him very closely on a biweekly basis, and we're constantly working on different initiatives and different problems we're solving with Reltio. But we got to meet each other face to face for the first time at Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in Orlando, and there we started this conversation about data quality. And Balaji had a lot to say about it, and I kept listening to all the things he had to say, and I said, let's pause this conversation right now, because this is really good information, and I think I have a lot of other customers who would love to hear this. And so the next idea was to really contact Chris and say, hey, let's have this conversation again. Let's rewind, let's replay the conversation, let's do it with a little bit more structure and a little bit more depth, and let's have it with a broader audience to share with you guys. And what I learned over there was just that data quality is it's ultimately what you want out of Reltio. Is you want to refine the data first you want to bring the data into Reltio, and then you want to refine it and get that data quality up in the organization, and how iterative that process is. Balaji has a lot of experience with that, and we wanted to just have this conversation with you guys and explore that. So I'll kick it off, Balaji, by first just saying, hey, can you just walk us through for the first section of this conversation about what the problem at Takeda was? I mean, granted, everybody has data problem, but what was it that drove you guys towards MDM, and what were the things you were trying to solve at Takeda?
Sure. So as part of the merger and acquisition, I would say like more than a problem, it was an area of opportunity, what we are looking out for when the Takeda leadership team decided to build a MDM platform that's going to cater multiple business units, right? We have neuroscience, hematology, PDT, rare diseases, so different business units. So we want to have one robust MDM engine that's going to cater all these business units. So looking at the role of MDM here, it's about not to work in silos, but you also need to have maintain a whole universe of HCPs and HCOs and product informations as such. And you need to deliver it with precise and accurate with a timely delivery to these business units so that they can take care of their business analytics, insights, targeting, call planning, so on and so forth. So that was the opportunity presented to us. And then we looked at the ecosystem, we looked at our customers, we looked at what is there versus what needs to be achieved, and what is the gap. So we did this robustly and identified what is the right platform for us. And then we took it from there, and then we built the architect around that, because building an MDM itself, it's not going to solve the problem. You need to make sure it's supporting applications, especially in the commercial pharma landscape, like CRM system, warehouse, data lakes, reporting layer, so on and so forth, has to be attuned to this new MDM platform so that the handshakes between these applications is smooth and seamless.
What were you guys doing before you had MDM? I mean, what was considered your source of truth, and what were you guys basing it all on?
We had MDM systems. Some of them were in-house, some of them were like outsourced, and more importantly, the business rules and the logics. It was scattered and it was placed in different applications, different layers, and different platforms. So we want to integrate all of those things. So we need to identify a common platform where it makes more sense for the business to have those business rules and logic, which are MDM centric, right? And you need to have additional business rules and logic on the MDM published records, which might be in the different platforms. But earlier, we didn't have that kind of, we were more on the siloed approach, but we thought like we need to consolidate all those business rules and logics and embed in one single platform and make sure that platform caters all the needs.
Okay, so I mean, you guys are well into your Reltio journey right now. You've got quite a lot of activity going on in Reltio, and I know your focus area is data quality. But I just want to ask a few more questions about exactly the problem you were trying to solve. What was your adoption journey like with Reltio in general? Getting started on it, working with other stakeholders, other data providers inside the company as well as outside, and getting that all put into Reltio. How did that journey go for you guys?
Well, I joined when the RFPs and RFQs was done, and they chose Reltio already, right? But I was pretty excited to know about the time I'll be start working on Reltio, because when I joined, I was taking care of some of the legacy applications, and we were in the transition period when this new Omni MDM was built, right? So that's where my journey started. And it was quite a lift and shift for us to move from the legacy MDM applications to a new Reltio UI-based applications. And we were quite fascinated with the way that we don't, first thing that strike out my mind is, based on my previous experiences with other MDM engines, that we don't have to do any upgrades, service upgrades. Everything will be taken care online, right? And there is nothing like a desktop-based software. It's all UI. And more importantly, one thing that stood out to me was the transparency, the reports, the dashboards, and the constant upgrades that's been happening at the Reltio. And the other thing that fascinated me is how we can download the data from the Reltio layer to our data platforms. And then you can take that data and then you can massage it, or you can publish it, or you can report it, whatever you want to. But The downloading part is another thing that is very important, I feel, for any MDM engine to be successful, right? And that's how we started. And the other thing is, when I said like we have to consolidate our MDM engines, obviously the universe volume is going to be like exponential, right? We have around like 3.8, around like 4 million HCPs and a million HCOs catering 4+ business units. So which means like you need to have a robust MDM engine that's capable of churning out the data as we speak. It has to constantly run, spin. It has to ingest data from 25+ sources, and it also need to apply those business rules and logics, and it also need to give a 24/7 UI platform for our stewards to steward those data sets at different areas, and it also need to be flexible to do a data uploading, for instance, or to do an effective LOB management, for instance, right? So that's how we have got few data points and KPIs, and so far Reltio is being fantastic.
Okay, no, it's great to hear. The funny thing I do remember when we had an early discussion was about the releases and how you had to change your mindset or to shift your mindset from on-premise software or software that you already own, and you have to upgrade yourself to the SaaS model where you kept asking me, can you tell me what version are we on or what upgrades have we done? And I said, you're on the latest version. There's nothing you have to do. You just keep checking your tenant and you have the latest version. And all the fact that weekly we put out updates and things like that. I think that's something that you guys had to get used to.
Yep.
I think I'm still in the process of kind of educating you guys on all the new capabilities of this platform that's constantly evolving, and that we're doing that. Can you talk a little bit about the universe of data that you have before we jump into the data quality aspects of your job and how you're managing that? Can you talk about the universe of data you guys kind of store, what domains you have, and how that's how it's kind of structured?
So we master HCPs and HCOs, which means like doctors and hospitals, right? Apart from that, we also master their attributes. Like if you take HCPs, we get data from trusted validation sources like licenses, professional designation, specialties, ranked specialties, and more importantly, address information, right? Which is very critical for the sales rep to go and have that kind of contact and have that sales pitch with the doctor. The same we have also for HCOs, and added we also have some of the attributes like class of trades, which is very critical for trading levels. And more importantly, we also have the address information, and we also maintain the affiliations and associations between an HCPs and HCOs. Those are all the major data entities that we master in our Reltio.
Yeah, and then you're sending that across. That's from 25 systems. You said you kind of get this data into your this as sources, and then you're sending that out to. Can you just share with us just the landscape of who's receiving this data and just a general idea of what they're doing with it?
So our consumers, we call them as like N-1, N-2, N-3, N-4, and so on consumers. So in general terms, like we have our own primary consumers who directly feed our publishing data sets, and then they store it, the customer information in their landscape, and that end users will use it. And from there, it go on. So that's why we call it as N-1 as our primary consumers, N-2 as our secondary indirect consumers, and so on and so forth. We also share data inside and outside of Takeda walls based on the contractual obligations what we have. So primarily, that's it. Primarily, we share our data sets to our warehousing and data lakes platforms, which acts as engine that does the marriage of the transactional units to the dimensional information and make sure like Dr. John Snow has got so-and-so wheels for so-and-so product. And then they take it from there, and then it's being catered to different BU units. And then they store that in their own reporting layers. They use it for like primary demand reports, or they use it for their analytics, business insights. And then it spreads out across, right? And we have IC, incentive compensation. That is one of the critical functionality in a commercial pharma landscape. And then we have targeting, call planning. These are all different functionalities that has to be done. Primarily, our data set goes to CRM, which is a front-end UI for our field sales representatives and units.
Okay, that sounds really familiar actually, because it's pretty much, I think, what most life sciences are doing right now with the data that they get from HCO, HCP data that they have, and they're using it downstream. So I think your use case kind of maps very well across the life sciences landscape of what everybody else is trying to do. So I think the conversation about data quality is really going to apply well to all of them. The one thing that I wanted to share was, remember early on we had the conversation about enabling the data quality dashboard on Reltio for you to see, and I've been doing that for all my customers, just walking them through it. Of course, now it's part of the platform, so everybody can just go in and look at it. But initially, when we were just doing that EA and you were exploring it, I know you got quite excited about the fact that you can look at some of this data and some of this detail, that you can see it. And obviously, Michael Burke, who's our product manager for that, is evolving it and growing that roadmap, and he's taking in a lot of feedback and he's working on it. But talk to me a little bit about what your role in data quality with respect to data quality is right now, and what are you doing about data quality at Takeda right now? Because I think that's the bulk of this information that I think this audience would really benefit from, is how you're approaching it, which I thought was not necessarily unique, but I thought it was just a different take than what I've normally seen other companies do with respect to data quality. So talk to us a little bit about your role, and then about what you're doing about it at Takeda. And if you don't mind sharing some of those assets that you use to track it, that was really interesting to see too.
Sure. As part of our MDM build, what we decided was like how to define the data quality. What is the acceptable threshold limits that we can say, like, hey, we allow your data inside from the third-party raw data sources. Sometimes we say, like, we allow it, but with few exceptions. And third thing is, sorry, your data is not even qualified enough for us to get allowed and get it mastered. So those are all the three parameters. So those are all the three, I would say, the definitions, business definitions, or the business data definitions that drives how you see your data quality, right? And we started off with a conservative approach, meaning like even if we see a one single iota of error, then we'll say, like, let's stop it. Let's not master it. But over the period of time, I wouldn't use the term trade-offs, but it's your exposure to the data availability from these third-party data source system suppliers. And you need to have that constant engagement and awareness to see, okay, so this is what I'm trying to achieve in my data quality. Maybe I have to revisit my thought process, right? So that's how it all started. And more importantly, to know about the data, you need to have a strong data profiling sense, right? So a third-party data source, its primary objective might be like carrying a transactional units, or it could be something for another BU, and it could be a stopover so that the BU would like to see the master ID for the doctor, right? So you have to keep that in mind. MDM is going to facilitate for the success of the business unit. And on keeping that in mind, you need to devise, or you need to architect your data quality standards. So to do that, you need to understand what the third-party data source provider, supplier provides you. You need to do a constant data profiling to gauge in what is the range that you can fix for a data quality. And you need to apply that as a standard for all the data sources that you're going to ingest, right? And the data quality standards is changes for the entities. For HCPs, you have to have a different lens. Compared to a HCO data, you have to have a different lens. Because let's take an example. HCP will have first name, last name, middle name, and R will have only a name, right? So based on the attributes and definitions, so it's a mixture of architecture, it's a mixture of data modeling, but more importantly, you need to have this business mindset of what I'm going to allow inside versus what is the acceptable threshold that I'm going to keep on asking myself that defines the data quality. So once you have that clarity on that, then you need to apply that at the individual attributes level. For instance, a HCP, first name, last name, what I'm going to check on that? Do I need to go with a character string length check? Or do I need to go with an exclusion list of characters? Let's say if you are getting a prescriber with Balaji unknown. Unknown is the last name, which is a common terminology used in the trusted validation sources, saying like the physician doesn't want to know, let his last name known. So in that case, they will just populate it as unknown. Now the question to you is, should you need to let the unknown as a valid last name? Because if you look at from the data quality perspective, do you see any special characters? No. is the name string length matches? Yes, it looks normal. So as a data quality, you cannot let the system to define how to kick this out. So you need to come up with a separate exclusion list that says like, hey, MDM, or hey, a system. If you see a name with unknown or a test or a prescriber, these are all like common terminologies. And how will you know? Through the data profiling exercise. Like, I don't want my mastering system to get confused with Dr. John Unknown or Dr. Test, something like that. So you need to create that kind of exclusion list based on the data profiling. I'm just giving you an example scenario why we need to have this type of exclusion list, right? And I'll pause here if you have any questions.
No, I was just going to say this, that you're just describing one attribute at this point in terms of data quality. If you have 100 attributes, you have 100 of these, at least 100 of these exclusion lists, if not more than that. That becomes a real challenge to manage, especially when you're trying to get data into. So are you doing all this profiling outside of Reltio before it even comes into Reltio?
Correct. We take that heavy lifting outside of Reltio because, like I said, MDM as a common analogy, like it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So it's not like a magic box. You throw in everything and then you're going to get the golden record. You make sure that you provide the valid info so that the match and merge rule settings and the survivorship rule settings, whatever you have in your Reltio box or in your MDM engine, is cognizant enough to give you the record, quality of record, what you're looking out for. Let's say if you have an unknown and went inside, you are kind of putting a bad apple in a basket of good apples, which invariably it's going to corrupt the other records by the way of possible matches. Or it might sit in the queue. It might pull other records too, which would not have gone into the queue at the first instance. You would not have let this record inside at all. Right. So you need to keep that in mind. The other thing is like going back to that, first name, last name is just an example. And you need to apply this for 150 plus attributes that you're going to let in and you're going to master it and you're going to own it. And out of that, you need to have a definition of which of them are LOVs, list of values. And how are you going to manage them in RDM? And what is the threshold limit when I say as like a profile completeness check? We have customer type, subtype values, which is, we think it's a mandatory value. We also think a profile should be considered as complete if it has a first name, last name, and address, city, address line, one city, state, zip. Only then we will let in, right? So in case there is a customer type, subtype as an LOV instance, which is again part of the profile completeness check. Not all the sources will have that ability to give these type of detailed values. So in that case, should you need to default to them? So in case if you want to default them, what would be the default value? And you need to think about how can you provide the default values based on the source systems, what the data it carries, and how it's going to impact. So you need to have this kind of end-to-end thinking before you come up with one single data quality aspect of it, right?
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Yes, Vivian.
So I have a question about the unknown because you mentioned about how you don't want to, ingest unknown as a last name, for example. But sometimes we're so tied, our hands are tied by the other regulations. For example, we see the same thing, unknown. That's, the data entry from the field. And there are calls logged to that. And there's there's a regulation that we cannot just skip calls, right? And even though we know that it's junk data, then we have to ingest it. How do you deal with that?
That's an excellent question. So I might be asking you like what type of governance principles you have when it comes to these type of conflicts with the other business decisions, for instance, compliance. So I would route those questions take it to the governance council and have a detailed discussion and see like what best can be done. Sometimes you have to push it by saying like, okay, I see this is a compliance risk, but you also need to have some justifications or a user story that says like, I let this in, how it is going to corrupt not only my data set, but also the data ecosystem in its entirety in future that we may not able to fix at all. You need to have that kind of valid justification, present it in front of the data governance, convince them and make sure what is the alternate workaround. Sometimes you can discover short-term wins. Sometimes you will find the long-term wins as well. That might change your the way the ecosystem or the architecture has been built around. But at least you need to document them. You need to have that kind of discussion.
Yeah, Balaji, Vivian is a longtime customer of mine too, so I'm happy to hear that she's on. And thank you, Vivian, for the question. I think the one question that brings up for me, especially with even Vivian's question, I think it's similar. Is you're doing a lot of pre-processing before it really enters into Reltio, and doesn't it just involve technological pre-processing? It also involves business rules and understanding and like you just said, governance principles around this data process. Can you talk a little bit about what structure you guys have for your data governance and the data, this managing of or filtering of data before it even hits MDM? Because I think a lot of my customers, I'm not saying all, but a lot of them, I think they take a slightly different approach. They take the data into Reltio, and then they let Reltio surface the fact that there's bad data quality there, and maybe at that point they go back to the source and try to fix it. But you're using a slightly different approach, and maybe other people are doing this too. I just haven't heard enough about it. But I'd like to know a little bit more about this filtering that you're doing ahead and this governance that you're doing, which I think could be a valuable thing for other people to adopt, even if it's in slow infusing slow changes or a little bit. It would be, I think, valuable for them.
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe data governance is an evolving and emerging point of discussion or a subject matter in this aspect, right? And as you could see, in many of the architecture, MDM will be the upstream system, right? And MDM has to churn the data and it has to publish, and then it goes to different downstream applications. And then they tie that business analytics into it. Now, the question is, if MDM can't or won't, it says like, I'm not going to send this data, I'm going to block this data right away, or I'm going to kick this data out based on my data quality principles. You may not know, like I explained before, the N-1, N-2, N-3, and so on and so forth, customers' impact, right? You might be thinking about like, I'm going to block only one doctor, but what if that one doctor is a highly writing prescriber or a highly targeted prescriber, which might impact one of the BU or the incentive comp of a sales rep that you may not be aware of. And we don't want to take that burden, right? So what we do is, and this is applicable for all the source systems, right? So when you think like from MDM principle or from MDM philosophy, that I am putting forth this data quality principle, and you need to provide the facts, which source systems are going to are currently contributing these type of bad data. And what are you going to do with this bad data? What is the remediation process? What kind of reject management reprocessing mechanism that you have in your place? And what is the volume of records, right? So you need to have these type of basic facts and volume checks. And then you also need to think about what type of questions that you're going to anticipate when you present this to a data governance. I'm going to do this type of quality checks, and I'm going to change a name of it, for instance, or I'm going to block certain customers, or I'm going to default certain attributes. So you need to present it so that you'll get an overall feedback rather than you go and talk to each and individual. Still, you may not be covering each and every one of those universe. So you present it as a data governance model, and you by presenting it as a ticket, and then you wait for the feedback. So that data governance model, hopefully they should be having representatives from each and every consumers of customer data. And then they have to take it back. They have to come back with analysis like, hey, I think we should be good. Or I think like we need more time. Or I think like, that's a development effort. We need time, resource, whatever it is. But at least you'll get a feedback on it. And unless otherwise you get a general consensus, or they might ask you for additional details. Right? So you need to have that kind of overall consensus agreement. And based on that, you need to evolve your data quality standard, because just because you are making a change in your layer, you may not know what is the compounded impact that it is going to create in any one of the downstream layers. So you need to be very cognizant about that. And more importantly, you need to be transparent and clear communication.
I think the thing that I really found interesting was the way you're managing data quality with that the asset that you have that you use to kind of track it. Could you talk to us a little bit about that data quality asset that you have, and maybe show us an example of what you use to manage data quality on your end?
Sure.
Not giving away any of the secret sauce of Takeda.
I'll try. The thing is, like, one thing that we realized after we launched our MDM application was we have to be transparent. First of all, we need to be transparent within ourselves. Since we talk about in millions, sometimes our B units come back and say, like, we see an issue. It's an MDM issue, right? Then we work on that specific issue. We learn something about it. So you work on one specific record, and then you are curious about it, and then you run a scan to see, like, are there any such records and falling under the same scenario? And then you get that, and you think about it, like, why we have this problem at the first instance. Some things, maybe it's an oversight, or it could be a blind spot, or it could be a new development effort, so on and so forth. But at least, first of all, you need to be aware that there is a problem like that existing in your MDM platform. So you run a scan, then you forget about it, and then it pops up again in another 3 months or 4 months, right? So what you do is, and what we did is, we identified as a lesson learned, whenever we come across any tickets, any business pain points, we took that issue and then we run a scan, and then we build it as a process, and then we execute that on a trend analysis, week on week basis, just to see. So when you run this on a periodically, what you will know is this an existing issue? Is this like a one-time issue? Meaning, like, you don't see a change in that volume at all. Meaning, like, that gives you an idea. Okay, it's a one-time cleanup. Probably might have some bad loads, things like that. If it is an existing issue, then what is causing that? You probe into that. Do you need to change your match and merge rule settings? Do you need to talk to your data supplier? Or do you need to add some more constraints, checks to your data quality to prevent this? And that leads to different discussions. The third thing is this something that the stewards can look into it, right? So one common example that I could talk about before I show that the data quality dashboard is the over matches and the under matches, right? Yep. The over matches and the under matches especially comes for any identifiers which are one-to-one mapped to a profile. For instance, if you take about a HCP, that HCP can have only one NPI, National Provider Identifier, right? Like how we have SSMs.
That's right.
The HCP can have, only one prescribed ID, things like that, or a CRM ID. So you take that as a base and you see how many HCPs has got multiple NPIs over matches.
Yep.
Under matches is how the same NPI is being shared with multiple HCPs. And in a given normal MDM landscape, this is an anomaly that constantly occurs. It doesn't mean like your MDM is broke, right? So you need to be clear about that. But at least it's an identifier, it's a KPI, it's a metrics. So how you gonna measure it comes to the next point. Are you going to seek only on the active figures, or are you going to work out on the inactive figures as well, right? The third thing is area of opportunities. Once you identify, you determine, out of my millions of records, I'm seeing like 10 HCPs. The immediate knee-jerk reaction is, so what? It doesn't matter. But those 10 HCPs might be high prescribing profiles or a BU, and they might be struggling for their call targeting purpose. I see multiple NPIs for this HCP. So my rep says, I can't go and talk to this person. I'm just throwing out an example here.
Yeah, sure.
So 1 HCP, 10 HCP, 1000 HCP, you have to be focused on that. But how do you know? So that's why you need to have this dashboard built. So we started off with the Excel version, and then we have a dedicated person to run these queries as and when. It's like an evolving. So we found one issue, and then we take care of that. Then we run a scan. Then we expand that to other identifiers in the same page, just to make sure like we are monitoring, we expand our radar such a way that we are not missing out any subject areas of a profile, right? And then we Okay, now we can see everything. Now
Yep.
the thing is, what is your prioritization? What are you going to look at? Are you going to look everything, or are you going to look at something?
Correct.
Right? The thing is, we have to look at everything, but we have to prioritize and we have to make it actionable on few things so
Yep.
that you can reduce the burden at your end. Right? So before I move on and share my screen, I'll pause here to see if you have any questions.
Well, I have a lot. I'm sure the group also has a lot. They're probably going to get to that in the end of this end of the discussion. But I just wanted to mention that what you did, what you're going to share with us, kind of evolved over you wanting to solve that problem, that data quality problem that you see, and that's kind of it's. And I think there's something important that you mentioned. I just want to reiterate: the fact that you find this in MDM doesn't mean MDM is broken. It means it's serving its exact purpose, and that it is surfacing these kind of data quality issues that you want to find in the organization and fix it. And I think sometimes some people get caught up in the fact that, hey, solve the problem in MDM. MDM's broken, but really it's solve the problem in various places so that MDM can be more refined and more pure and clear.
Yep. Or you have to educate your end users like this is not even a problem. Or if you see a problem, share with us what is your priority. What is it out of 100 records? If you are focused only on 3 records, give me that as a priority so that I'll work on it rather than me working on those 100 records. Rest 97 are not so prioritized. They might get fixed as and when the MDM gets fixed. But so we started off with this Excel version. We started off manually executing those queries as soon as we get the data downloaded from the Reltio layer. And then we started looking at it. And then at one point of time, what we thought is like, with all transparency, this should not be MDM centric. Rather, we have to put that into a UI based BI platform, business intelligence reporting platform. And then we also need to make sure that it should not scare away the end user who is going to look at it, because it's all jungle of numbers, I would say, right?
Yeah.
But at least you need to have that constant education / training / communication to make sure that you are aligned with the end user, and you have to make this report actionable.
Yep.
Right. So that said, I'm going to share my screen here. Let me know if you are able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome. So what you're seeing is the dashboard. Imagine it was in Excel, and then we converted that into a Power BI platform. So we identified around 20 plus reports, subject areas that we expanded our radar. And then out of that, we thought these 10 reports are very critical, right? So by subject areas, you could see like for HCPs, there are like by at the HCP profile level, then by the sources, then by the specialty, which is very critical to carry out any pharma business. And then we have ID frequencies. We have but n number of IDs coming for HCPs, HCOs, and then the potential matches, which is very critical to see how stewardship queue is looking at. And then we have state licenses, which is very important for compliance and legal purposes. And then we have address, which is again critical, right? So we identified these areas. And then as you could see, we have listed down by individual I wouldn't call that subtitles, but at least like subjects, individual subjects under which we carried the queries by saying like how these NPAs are performing, how these specialties are performing. Show me how many records are with multiple records, which should not be the case. And then we also have a threshold limit by saying like between last week to this week. So this is basically a 26 week of trending information, right? And as you could see, you might be seeing some red highlights in the cell, which basically tells like that catches the attention of the user, because as you see, it's a jungle of numbers, right? You might lose yourself by looking at these numbers instantly. Rather, if you want to look at, I'm interested only in this week's threshold limit. Show me only the threshold limit. Then we have that type of tolerance limit that again, it's all within your definition. So between last week to this week, what is the tolerance limit that you see that as an accepted standard of range? In case, let's say like, let's take an NPI. So between this week and this week, I'm seeing like 20 records. So what? It's not a big deal. Rather, if you see like 200 records. So you need to identify the threshold limit. And the moment that exceeds between the current week to the previous week to the current week, then you need to call that out so that someone takes a look into it at least thinks about it before even taking action of it. So that's what we thought like this could be helpful, and then it is working so far.
Yeah, no, the question I have for you is, I mean, obviously this didn't happen overnight. You were all tracking all these in spreadsheets and things like that. And for me, for the audience here, I think what's valuable is to know that it's evolved over time. It's matured into this BI screen that you're sharing right now that you guys use to track week over week changes that you're seeing and trending that you're seeing. And when you see it trending either negatively or positively, you take action on it. Yeah, you're looking for something to do. What is the if one of my customers here on this call, or anybody on this call, wants to build something like this out, if you were to give a clear roadmap as to how they build it out, what would be the steps they should take to kind of come up with these? How do they approach this to come up with this kind of a data quality dashboard for themselves? Not the technical aspect, but the approach from a business point of view as to how to view all these different things. How do they come up with this?
Sure. First thing is like ask yourself, do you have that kind of tangible data sets? So the foundational block for all these things is you need to have the data, right? Which is accessible, right? And then ask yourself, what is a KPI that matters you the most? What is bugging you, or what is bugging your BU partners the most? What is the most biggest pain points that you wish that you want to fix it? The third thing is like, what is something that you know that you have to keep looking at it, but necessarily you are not looking out for a fix? Like a data scenarios, like I said, like an over matches or under matches. It is not something that require you to be like being more conservative on the match rules, which might increase the potential match queue. Or if you're being more lenient, then it might start letting in more over matches, under matches. So you need to have that kind of threshold mechanism. The fourth thing is like, you have to keep on constantly exploring out of these options. So that said, the first thing is like the data profile. You have to have a mechanism that constantly looks at your data at your specific lens and shows you exactly what you're looking at. Now that can give you different options. Like, I'm not seeing this in the Reltio UI. Probably not. Then you have to, that again shows you. So this is basically a fact, right? It brings all the issues to the surface, however you wish to look at it. You see an NPA over matches here. I'm just giving you an example. Yeah. I take this to Reltio and see, I see a different figure. So which means like the layer what you're looking at versus the layer what you see in Reltio UI are not in sync, which you probably have to investigate first. Yep. So first thing is like the foundational data based on which you are building the QC or the TQ chip. Is this a true data or not? Right? So you have to get the clarity first. The next thing is, once you have that, ask yourself, what is a priority? What is the definition? Like, would you like to say it? Because my MDM gets refreshed as we speak. It constantly runs. But some of the MDMs might be getting refreshed once in a week. Mm-hmm. So would you like to see a weekly trend, or would you like to see a bi-weekly trend, or would you like to see a monthly trend, right? And the next thing is, what is your subject areas that you want to focus on? So if you take commercial pharma, I can talk about HCPs, HCUs. But if you take retails, you will have customers, you will have products, right? Things like that. So you need to identify those subject areas and prioritize it, because once you start thinking about the data quality checks, if you start brainstorming it, you'll get a lot of ideas. Yep. But when it comes to execution, there are many constraints like resourcing, budget, time, right? And along you have to do it with your day jobs. So have that kind of brainstorming and get to the point. Can I do it? Can I do this manually? It's not something you have got budget, you have got money, you build something and no one uses it. Then what is the purpose of it? So you need to have at least few end users who are dying really hard, like me, to look at these refresh on a weekly basis. Who is the first person to go and check it out, see like how my MDM works. You need to have that kind of end users who is keenly observing it. You need to have that kind of proof of persons, I would say, rather than proof of concepts, who needed this like egg study. And it's not like a one-time thing. You work on this week over week.
Yeah. I think the valuable thing you shared with me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Balaji. The valuable thing you shared with me is that this really came out of pain points. It stemmed from a list of pain points that were shared with you from the people that are consuming the data. And in addition to that, you had to prioritize among those pain points, which were the ones were the most important to solve for right away, and then kind of backlog the rest of them and approach them as time went on.
Yep. So don't go into the build. Just now you found it. Yep. You execute it on a manual basis until you feel like you carry that burden. Now it is time for you to make it automated.
Make it automated. Very cool. Well, I think, Chris, I think we're getting close to the point where we can start asking questions.
Great.
This is a good time?
Yeah, it's a great time. That's why I come on video.
Can I stop sharing?
Yeah, you can stop sharing.
Okay.
So we have a few questions from the audience, and you might have actually answered one or two of them, but the first one was from Carrie, and she said, is there a formal data governance organization you're partnering with? It sounds like there is.
We have created a data governance within our business unit, and it's like an evolving. So first, you need to identify the stakeholders. Who is going to be the participants? Who is going to be the representatives? Then you determine the cadence of when are you going to meet. The third thing is like, what are you going to discuss? And what are you going to discuss is basically, it's an evolving thing. Sometimes you take something which could have been dealt within your MDM team itself. You don't necessarily need to carry that to data governance. So you need to carry a weightage and value to it. So that's why you need to have a mini data governance within yourself, within your team, to identify the areas that can be resolved within your team. If that can't be resolved, then you have to have a valid justification, business use case points to take it to the governance and present it to the others.
Yeah, and there's no external structure, is there, Balaji, that you guys have adopted, or some kind of a best practice of data governance that you've absorbed and built it out, or you just kind of came up with it on your own as per need?
We certainly could have role model some of the things, the best practices that we have learned from the summits and other things, but you need to pick things that suits your landscape, your audience, your stakeholders. What are you going to achieve out of it? And you need to think about, it's not that you have this weekly meetings, you talk about it and then you forget. You need to have a follow-ups, and more importantly, you need to create some kind of a change management or an incident management just to identify the issue. I talk about XYZ, now I have a ticket, so I don't forget about it. Yep. Then you all get the consensus, then you need to move forward with the ticket to design, develop, and fix it. That's a whole different conversation, but at least everyone gets aligned to that.
Yeah, and I think you might have, so thank you for that additional info, but I think you actually answered this particular question, but let's see if you have any other thoughts around it. What's your approach to fixing data quality problems prior to loading to Reltio versus fixing with Reltio? Do you have a different categories of problems that you'll fix, for example, like in the ETL versus what you'll do within Reltio? I think you kind of answered that, but
well, in Reltio, for instance, LOV management, RDM layer is something that I would focus on keeping it with Reltio, right? But again, it's your business use cases, how you want, where you want to keep it. So I have seen some people done that with ETL. I have seen some people done that using MuleSoft kind of sandwich platform. Some even allow it within the Databricks. So there is a number of ways you can do it, but end of the day, what you do, it matters the most. If you want to kick out a record, if it is coming with a missing first name, it doesn't matter whether you put that in an ETL or into a ingesting layer or into a cloud platform, something like that. But more importantly, are you auditing that? How are you accounting that? You kick out something, but you should know that end of the day, from a data supplier, I kicked out for so and so reason. You need to have a valid reason, and you need to you should be cognizant and transparent enough to share your data quality standards with your data supplier, saying that I'm not accepting your data because of it is failing my data quality standards. Now, if you have issues with that, let's talk about it. But at least I feel you need to know about my data quality standards.
How kind should you be when you say it?
Kind of how I am
I'm not
talking to
taking
you
your
now.
data.
Wait, I can clarify this because he's actually doing that with me right now about CAS, about addresses. He's very nice about it and
Yeah.
very firm that his data is correct and ours, we need to go revisit how we're doing the address cleansing. So he's very good about that. The one thing I'll ask Balaji as a follow-up to what you just mentioned about getting this, we've been talking about moving more of the ETL and the data quality checks outside of the platform and into the platform. We've been talking a little bit about that. You've been wanting to get it closer to the platform. What's your drive to move it from outside to inside? Because we're working on it. We're trying to figure it out. But what is your drive? What's driving you to move it closer to the platform?
That makes my work easy, right? So I don't have to deal with multiple platforms, right? I know I know what is going inside of Reltio by looking at Reltio. I also see what is not going inside of Reltio by looking at Reltio. That gives me the flexibility. And more importantly, I don't have to go to another dashboard or another platform to look out the kickouts. And sometimes, some kickouts are business data specific, for instance, unknown. Some are technology related. Seeing when a platform or when an engine talks to a Reltio or a cloud application engine like Reltio, sometimes due to timing issue or sometimes the system doesn't match up holistically. It could be like a one-time thread or it could be a one-time issue or due to platform upgrades whatsoever. So you need to consider those type of rejects as well, which is not something that we are not aware of. Sometimes the record is 100% quality now, but still due to these technology issues, the record may not get cascaded into Reltio. So you need to keep that into account. But that said, if you have those type of DQ checks slowly migrated into Reltio, and you have to do it with valid, patience and with proof of concepts that it is working when you ship those data quality standards from one platform to the Reltio. And you need to make sure that Reltio is smart enough to show you exactly what you're looking out for.
Okay, I know.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think you answered Abhi's question. You definitely answered mine.
Thank you, Bob.
We have some comments here and then other questions. And this is kind of going back to the earlier conversation. Carrie said, don't want to master when it is unknown. It might be better to see this as null versus actual value. So it's definitely a good comment there. And then Sandro says, one consideration is to use reference profiles that do not have match and merge rules. So especially if the profile is part of an important relationship ingested from your source system. So it would allow you to profile this data in Reltio and identify data quality issues. So good questions around that. And then Kurt, I'm going to come back to yours since we asked a couple of questions from you, but I'm going to go to Max. What is happening with data governance across business units? Do you have business-centric data governance, or is data governance being driven from a data perspective?
That's a very valid question. So it all depends on how your BUs are looking at the data. Who is acquiring the data? Who is maintaining and managing the data contracts or the data supplier contracts? You have to start from there. How is your data acquisition program is looking like? And what type of roadmaps that you have? And if it is one BU centric, then you need to the data governance naturally has to evolve from that, because it starts from the entry point, the data acquisition, and then the data management, the data change management, and finally you decide how the data is going to percolate into a different applications. Finally, who is the end user of it? If the end user maintains all these things, then the end user will know, okay, I know what is coming in, and I know where it is getting stopped, where it is getting massaged. So I know what I want to have when it comes to data governance, right? If the end user says it doesn't matter to me, I'm just a user of it. Then if you are acquiring and managing those type of data sets, so it's organization to organization varies. So you need to create and build and manage the data governance discussion, and you need to have a representation from the end user. So that I know that you do not know what are the things that we do with the data, but I know that the change in my data is going to impact your business. So let's talk about it. sometimes that user may not be having an end-to-end analysis of or an outlook of how a name change or an address change is going to impact me, right? And then in that case, let's test it. And then you make sure that in the lower environments, what is acceptable kind of thresholds? What is the testing effort that you put in? So you need to have that kind of discussion. So this will also brings you like, I know, I do not know, I know partially, which is good, but at least you need to bring it to the surface and table it and document it.
I love it. Are the data quality reports, dashboards real time or scheduled?
It's scheduled.
Okay.
It's a weekly run, so it's scheduled.
Got it. What's your process for data profiling? Do you use a tool, or if you do, which one is it and why?
Well, you can do it in a number of ways. So it's based on the source systems, how they are planning to share the data with you, right? Majority of them share the physical feeds, and again with the physical feeds, you need to ask whether it is a full feed or a delta feed. So you need to ask all these questions before you think about the data profiling. And how big is the data set? If it contains like volumes of records, millions of records, and if it is like horizontally, it is so huge, it is having like 100 number of columns. But for MDM perspective, you might be mapping only 6 to 7 columns, right? Only the name, address, info out of it. So in that, you need to understand what are you going to interested in, what are you going to map it, and based on that, you need to do that profiling, right? And then also look out for the documentation. So some of them might be like LOVs or reference values. For instance, like I said, customer type, subtype, or sometimes you need to derive it. So you need to consider all those things while you do the profiling. And you can profile it by staging the data in any of your warehousing platforms. Like, right, start with a simple query, and then you build a report out of it, and then Excel, sometimes it helps you based on the volume by putting some pivot charts, but at least you need to start off from there.
Start somewhere. Yep. And so just 2 quick comments, and I think we'll wrap it up. But so Josh says, when it comes to data quality validation within Reltio, the challenge I've seen is using Reltio for complex validation, like MPI being shared across profiles. You'll need a layer external to Reltio to do this kind of validation. And then Kurt says, interested in the size of the team, so onshore, offshore, perhaps so dedicated to MDM and data quality development and maintenance. Can you share that at all, or the last few minutes?
Sorry, is that a question to me?
Yeah, the question about your data quality team and the data governance. I think the data quality team. Am I correct, Chris?
Yeah, dedicated to MDM and data quality development. And what does that team look like? Is it offshore, onshore? Is it?
It doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter as long as you determine, like, do you see a team to carry out the data quality, or do you want the data quality to speak for itself? So in this case, I can talk about my dashboards. So we have a scheduled process that downloads the data from Reltio layer to our data platform layer. And then these reporting process will get a sneak peek or point in time snapshot of the data based on that queries what we put in, and then it comes in and it shows us.
Hey,
now, if you think about it.
So Kurt, I was specifically looking to understand the size of the team. Like what are the amount of resources that are dedicated to your overall MDM and data quality program?
Like I said, there is nothing like a definition of the resourcing or the number of persons who is going to work on it. If you ask my team in specific,
specifically.
I would say like we have got I have myself, and I've got an analyst, and then we have got a team of stewards working on it, and then we have got a run team who takes care of the operations.
How big is the team of stewards in the run team, and how are they split between offshore, onshore? Just curious.
Stewards is basically based on the BU, like how they want to cater the needs, right? So it's all consulting based, it's all externally outsourced. And then run team, again, it goes with the SOPs, how the IT team structures that. But based on the volume, based on the type of issues, it ranges between like 5 to 10, 5 to 6.
Okay. Well, guys, that was really great, and really appreciate the time. Balaji, Abhi, thank you for the questions. Very informative, educational, and it's always good to hear from others on how they're both dealing with data quality and using Reltio to do some of that. So thank you everyone for coming. I know there's a few other questions in there. I'll see if I can send those over to Balaji to get those answered, but please take the survey at the end. We always want to know how well we're doing and, other shows that are coming up or other shows that you guys want to hear about. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to Abhi and Balaji for giving us some really great content on data quality and MDM.
Thank
you so much for having me, Abhi. And Chris.
No problem.
Appreciate that.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, of course. All right. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.